We are here at the annual Frontier Securities Investment Conference, and I'm joined by Marc Liinamaa from Citi Investment Research. He is based in Hong Kong. Mr. Liinamaa, could you please introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what your company does and what your purpose is of visiting Mongolia?
Well, I'm involved with Citi Investment Research, so provide equity research. Joined in April from Morgan Stanley in New York, where I've been covering the metals and mining sector for the last decade. And was interested to come here just because it's an interesting conference at a very important time in the evolvement of the Mongolian mining industry. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I thought it was worth coming up here and spending some time.
Okay. So does Citi provide research material into Mongolia? And
well, we've been involved in some of the financings. Citi has, as a corporate finance house, has been involved in some of the financings of some of the names, but we provide equity research coverage. Not myself, but somebody who I work with on MMC and South Gobi at this point. But we would expect to be involved over time, yes.
Okay, all right. And what is your general outlook on Mongolia and the market here?
Well, I guess you have to break that question into two different buckets. Generally on the commodities markets, I think we have a very constructive view. I think what we've seen over the last few years is a situation where the mining industry is having trouble keeping up with the demand that's out there for the commodities. Mm-hmm. When you look at Mongolia itself, I mean, from a location perspective, fantastic. It's sitting right beside China, which has been the engine of growth. From an interest perspective, I think it's very interesting just because they're coming of age as a mining country at a time when so many interesting debates are out in the market. And I think Mongolia, and I give them very high marks for how they've gone about this so far, but they're trying to do things, set up a regulatory framework, which I think they've done a reasonable job doing so far. I think they've got to keep the pace up on that and make sure the rules of the game are very, very clear. I think it's important, and they've done some of this, is to bring some international mining culture into the country. You don't want to do it all by yourself. If you bring in some international companies that have to earn their license to operate around the world every day, they're going to come in, they're going to do it right, and I think they'll set the right base up. And I think just coming to grips with how the rewards of the business should be divided between the host country and the providers of capital is a very important debate that they've got to get their heads around. And I think one final thing that they've got to think about is what the right size of the industry should be relative to the size of the population. I mean, you want the industry to create wealth here, but you also want it to create a wealth at a pace that makes sense, given that it's not that big a country from a pop. So it's just a lot of fascinating things going on at the same time, and I think it's going to be a very interesting next couple of decades for Mongolia and for the mining industry in Mongolia.
Yeah. Well, how do you see investors that are interested in coming to Mongolia and investing here in Mongolia? What do you think are the main constructions vehicles they should use, or how do you see the opportunities for people wanting to come in?
Well, I think is there interest in investors wanting to be exposed to the Mongolian story? Absolutely, and I think you probably see institutional investors coming up here on a very regular basis. But of course, what investors are always interested in is returns. It's kind of a very non-personal business. I'm going to provide this capital, and these are the returns that I expect to get. And I think there's been a significant amount of capital flow in this direction. I think it will continue, but to really help nurture that process, I think setting up the rules of the game in a way that are very transparent and very fair early is incredibly important. And again, I give the government so far pretty good marks for going about it that way.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.